Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. Have you noticed a theme between channelers? No matter what the teaching is, there's always love. And the channeler will represent whatever entity, whatever force, whatever beautiful thing. From the other side of the veil, whatever energy. And they will always say that they love you. This is the staple, dear ones, of knowing that you are listening to messages that are accurate and true, pure, benevolent, that there is great love for you from that source which you call the Creator. There are things that you do not understand that would be eye-rolling to so many. And they come with that which you call the creation story. The creation story of the planet is one of the most loving stories that can be told. If you saw it the right way, if you knew what really happened, over a period of time, how humans were given free choice and actually implanted with a soul. The soul that they were implanted with is different from a soul perhaps of an animal. It's a soul that is allied with the Creator. It's a soul that can advance itself and eventually evolve to be even ascended. It's different. It's beautiful. Not all life forms in this galaxy have that ability. This one does. And in that soul implantation, in that time when you were given the 23 pairs of chromosomes instead of 24 that all the other animals have, in that time, there was other things that took place. And this is not always given to you. But today I want to remind you of it because we are on a subject that talks about the elements of the spark. And if this is the first time you've heard that, it is the associated energies that go along with an expanded realization. An expanded realization of God inside. What would those be? At the same time, dear ones, that the creation story was happening on this planet 200,000 years ago, you have to understand that other things also had to occur. How is it that this planet is so responsive to you? What about all those grids you've heard about? Some invisible, some are scientific, and some are metaphysical. What about those? You might say, did they all exist before the creation story? And the answer is no. We have told you before that some were baked into the planet. That means to say they grew with the planet. And some did not. Some were given to you later. And I want to talk about one in particular. The one that is an attribute of the spark, that is to say, that belongs to an awakening human being. It's the one that was seen by the indigenous first. And it's called the Gaia grid. Perhaps the Gaia grid is the most misunderstood one. When you talk about the grids of the planet, there's always the most popular, the magnetic and the crystalline, but the Gaia, what is it? What kind of energies are there? I want you to take a look at this for a moment in a sacred way. Because implanted into the planet was the partnership that you would require to live here. And that partnership is a partnering with sacredness. Any indigenous listening to this right now will know exactly where I'm going. In the past, dear ones, before civilization became more modern as it is today before your cities, for thousands of years, those who lived on the planet, who understood who they were, who saw the Creator in all things, all of those would say there is no difference between the stars, the dirt of the earth, and the trees, and the souls of humanity. That they were all allied in such a way that one could not possibly exist without the other. And that is why in all of the indigenous stories, in their chants and their songs, they relate to Gaia. Those energies of the planet, and there are so many of them, that were created as partners for you. There is so much in the Gaia grid that is filled with life. Life that is multidimensional, dear ones, not the animals. The animals like you live upon the planet and enjoy the grid, but they were also here before it was placed. What I'm telling you, there is even a multidimensional life beyond yours, beyond that which is your soul, that is baked in, if you would say, to the Gaia grid that was put here carefully during those years when humanity was given the creation, was given the 23 pairs of chromosomes, was given free choice, and had its very soul altered to be sacred. All part of that which you would call the setup. Today, in this, a modern place, you would think the Gaia grid has been sublimated. That is to say, it's less than. Now you don't need it as much. And that is a perception. That's a perception based upon your schedules, your lives, what you've been told is important, and also, of course, those organizations that are spiritual in your civilization that don't even talk about it. I'm going to give you another name for the Gaia grid, which will confuse you. I'm going to also call it the ancestor grid. Because also within the indigenous ideas of what the earth meant to them and the energies of survival were also part of their ancestral acknowledgement. Almost every indigenous on the planet turns to their ancestors as one of the most important sources of intuition and wisdom and help that any human could have. Now let me ask you, enlightened one who sits here or listens, tell me all about your ancestors. And you're going to draw a blank. Unless you have an indigenous lineage, you're going to draw a blank. Where has that gone? What has happened to the Gaia grid? What is the ancestor grid anymore? And so let's start to look at this and tell you it is alive and well, and it is precious, and it is beautiful, and it's still your partner. And you have ancestors. But we're going to call the ancestors a little differently than the lineage of your heredity. And we'll do it in a moment. But let's talk about that which is the Gaia energy. I've told you before that my partner is not sensitive to outside energies. He could not be and still channel me. He has to be focused on the energy that he understands. There are no distractions. There are no distractions from any other place for him. This is where he belongs, sitting in a chair, focused, so that the purity and the truth of these messages can ring true. And yet, we let him see something so he would understand part of what his teaching was about. We've said this before, for he was in a place called Tasmania, in one of those awesome rainforest areas where everything is a green that goes beyond green, where the oxygen is rich, and where you feel like you are born yet that morning. It is so special as you walk and you watch the forest. And in that place, he saw that which you would call a diva. And you can call it whatever you want to, and you can give it names, but this is multidimensional life in Gaia. It's the life force of the forests, of the plants, of the dirt, of the trees, of the air. And quite often it will come together in a confluence of energies and show itself in all of its light and beauty and color. And those who are sensitive can almost call it to them and see it, just like the indigenous could. They were so used to the lights, and they were so used to that, which is the life force of Gaia. No wonder it became their partner and their friend, because they saw it almost daily. He got to see it. In a fleeting way, it never stood still. But he knew what he was seeing, and he didn't want to leave. It's the only time we showed him this. An allowance for him to move out of the box that he was in. He has not seen it since. All of this so he can give these messages that say the Gaia grid is filled with a partnership for you, and it's alive. The Gaia grid isn't just Mother Nature. It is not just Pachamama. It is a living grid that is partnering with you and for you and calls to you even now. It is the ancestor grid that is also filled then with the ancestral energies of wisdom. We told you long ago about soul splitting. It's confusing, dear ones. But let's simplify it. When you leave this planet, a piece of you stays. And it stays in several places, and one of them is the Gaia grid. That's the ancestral part of the Gaia grid. And the indigenous knew this and felt it and called upon their ancestors in the same way they would call upon the energies of the grid, of the nature that they lived within. For their roof was the sky, and their walls were the mountains. And it was far easier for them to see the connection and work with the connection. Far easier than you can today. You're not even told about the connection. You're not even told about the connection in the most sacred places you visit, that you call your organizations which are spiritual. Almost none of them even acknowledge that it's there. So perhaps it's time to start a process of awareness. And here is the teaching. Dear one, in the modern civilization, we're not asking you to change your lifestyle or become impractical or any of these things. We're asking you to take time to acknowledge this life grid. Some of you are able to get away into the forests, into the areas which are so beautiful, with the lakes and the trees, and sit for a moment or two and soak in the life force of your partner. Some of you can, some of you can't. And for those who cannot, it is still there. Even though you may not be able to hug the tree, you can ask the tree to hug you. For the Gaia grid knows your name. It is your partner on this planet. It helps you to exist. It works with the crystalline grid, the magnetic grid, all of those for your life force as well. You can sit even in the middle of the city and surround yourself as though you could see the stars like the ancestors could, and the mountains so pristine like they could. You can imagine yourself in the lake, in the river. And in that imagination and in that intuition, it will come to you in such a way, as it does with the indigenous who have the same issues of living in a modern society and can't get away. They'll create their Gaia as they walk around. Ask them how they do it. It never leaves their consciousness. And we're asking you to include it in yours, to make it a staple of your meditation. The ancestors, oh, this gets good. So many of you in the societies of today, in the amalgamation of heredity, have no pure lineage any longer. And it's difficult for you then to call upon the ancestors, even though there would be perhaps a few in that soup we call the Gaia grid. Instead, I'm going to remind you of something. You have a lineage which we're going to call Akashic. How many lives have you lived on the planet? I am sitting in front of an elite group of old souls, and I will tell you, some of you number into the thousands. You carry these lifetime existences with you in your Akash. The earth knows them, you know them, and the energies of all of them have imprinted themselves on the Gaia grid and on the crystalline grid. Pieces and parts of all of them are still here. Dear ones, that is your ancestry. If you don't have a pure ancestry, that's the one to pull upon. The ones that shared your soul over and over and over have pieces and parts of them still here. Is that too strange for you? That means you can call upon the wisdom of you, having lived lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, learned and learned and learned. And you did it in the same time frame as the ancestors of the old, of the indigenous. You're not any younger than they are. But you don't have that chemistry that is pure, but you have the Akashic, which is. There are your ancestors. I'm hearing some of them now. Some of them play the banjo, I believe. And so I've just explained in this teaching section, you can claim this grid, you can claim the aliveness of it. You can call upon it just like the ancestors did. Because in this energy, all these things are available to you. The lineage of your ancestors is you in your Akash. All of these things are available just like they were to the indigenous. You didn't lose them. You're just not aware. We'll speak more of this. But I wanted to give you the information that is so beautiful, that is missing on the planet today in so many cultures. That's an element of the awakening, of the spark, to relearn and revisit your partner Gaia and an ancestry that you've never thought as helpers. And they are. All part of new paradigms that you're beginning to learn. I'll be back. And so it is.